The group of four departed for a week-long trip to Corfu, comprising my wife Kirsty and her three lifelong friends from school, Laura, Jane, and Shona. They were inseparable and made it a tradition to go on a couple of short breaks together each year. I didn't mind, as it allowed me to enjoy a couple of golfing weekends in return. While a full week was unusual, they found a last-minute bargain that was cheaper than their usual weekend getaways. With hastily arranged time off, they flew out on Monday and were scheduled to return the following Sunday. That left me, Mark, in charge of our 15-year-old son Jake and 8-year-old Chloe. It's not that I couldn't cook, but Kirsty left pre-prepared meals for the week just in case I struggled in the kitchen. The week started off smoothly with help from both sets of grandparents. I managed work alongside the school runs, sports activities, and dance clubs. I made a decent effort at handling household chores, partly thanks to Kirsty's detailed instructions for the washing machine, left in the form of post-it notes. Kirsty called a few times, mainly to ensure I hadn't caused any mishaps, but also to remind the kids of her love and how much she missed us all. We survived the week, and I waited for the girls at the airport alongside John and Tony, the husbands of Shona and Jane, respectively. Laura remained single. The kids were absorbed in their gadgets at home, and I trusted Jake to look after Chloe for short periods. As Shona and Jane emerged through arrivals looking tired, followed by Laura, I noticed Kirsty was absent. The other girls' greetings seemed subdued, and I continued scanning the crowd for her. Laura mentioned an email from Kirsty that I hadn't received. Confused, I asked if she was okay, fearing she might be ill or injured. They assured me she was fine, but had decided to extend her stay for a couple of days with some friends. My barrage of questions yielded vague responses, leaving me feeling concerned and embarrassed. Upon returning home, I immediately checked the computer, finding Kirsty's email that had arrived just after I left for the airport. It echoed what Laura had said, mentioning a spontaneous sailing trip with friends and an extended stay. However, it left me puzzled as to why she hadn't called to inform me, especially considering she hadn't called in the past couple of days. The mention of friends left me perplexed as I couldn't think of anyone she'd be sailing with. I tried calling her mobile, but it went to voicemail. Leaving a terse message, I grew increasingly uneasy. Despite repeated attempts, there was no response. I then started calling her three friends, hoping they could provide more information. Shona's husband, John, suggested I come over to their house at 9 p.m. When I arrived, all the other girls and Tony were present, and the atmosphere felt tense. John initiated the conversation. "Mark needs to know what happened, Shona, spill it out." We met some guys at a pool party in the harbor on the last night and went to their place for a few drinks. It was just a party. Kirsty got talking to the owner, a guy called Samuel. Tony interjected. According to Jane's version, it was more than that. There was kissing and making out. They were all having a grand old time on some rich guy's yacht. Shona shot a glare at Jane as Laura chimed in. It wasn't like that. A couple of the guys tried it on, but we turned them down. When they got too persistent, we left. Well, we left, but Kirsty stayed. Damn, I muttered, realizing I had said the word aloud without even realizing it. I tried to convince her to come with us, but she was determined to stay, Shona added. They weren't doing anything, Mark, just talking, she clarified. I presume she didn't make it back to your rooms, I inferred. Silence confirmed my assumption. She came back at lunchtime today and announced she was staying on for a few days, picked up her stuff, and left. We all shouted and screamed at her, but she was determined to go. We don't understand what happened with her, but she wouldn't be talked out of it. So she's staying out there with some millionaire? I guess so, was the most informative response I received. The conversation went in circles, with the guys furious and me feeling utterly bewildered. This behavior was so unlike her, it simply didn't make sense. I returned home on autopilot, sorted out the kids, and collapsed into bed exhausted but unable to sleep, my world shattered. The next morning, I woke up late and rushed frantically to prepare the kids for school, packing lunches and dropping them off. Arriving late to work, I missed the start of a client meeting, much to my manager's dismay. Still, I hadn't heard anything from Kirsty. Work was hectic all day, and I was late picking up Chloe. Thankfully, Shona, Jane, and their kids stayed with her in the schoolyard. Seeing how flustered I was, they offered to help with pickups for the rest of the week. They inquired about Kirsty's email, and I explained how little information it provided, leaving me completely in the dark. On Monday evening, I finally received a call from Kirsty. She immediately launched into apologies for not calling earlier, claiming she had no signal. Without pausing, she explained about the sailing trip opportunity with friends, feeling it was too good to pass up. I let her talk before cutting in. So you're staying with Samuel on his yacht then? The silence was palpable. Mark, it's not what you think. What I think is that you're living it up with a millionaire, ditched your husband, embarrassed me in front of our friends, and didn't even bother to stay in touch with your kids. It's just a few days. I'll be back on Thursday. Don't bother, in fact, don't bother coming back at all. I hung up, feeling furious. What a complete mess. The phone rang repeatedly, but I ignored it. Then a text came through. I am sorry, first flight back is tomorrow 3 p.m. We need to talk. Tell kids I love them. My anger reached new heights. We need to talk and tell the kids I love them. After she ignored them, she had to be joking. The next day, I arranged for her parents to look after the kids. They were shocked by her actions, but urged me to hear her side of the story before deciding anything. The kids were starting to ask questions too. I had no intention of picking her up. She dragged her case through the door at 8 p.m. I said nothing and just looked at her. I'm sorry, Mark. I wasn't thinking. It was an opportunity to have a break from everything, and I took it. I never thought about how it would look. You must think I'm a fool. You stayed over on his yacht even though the others begged you to go back to the hotel with them. He was nice. We just talked. Bullshit, Kirsty. You don't abandon your family to just talk to someone who's nice. Did you just talk for the whole 3 days? Yes, mostly. I didn't have sex with him. I don't believe you. Even if I did, you still left me for another man. I didn't abandon you. I just had the chance for a free trip. Other people were there. Samuel was a total gentleman, a really generous host, and a good listener. And I suppose I don't listen to you. No, it wasn't that. You do. It felt like such an escape from our normal lives, like I could choose anything and be free. Our lives are a bit stuck, a bit, well, dull. You have got to be kidding. This is the life you wanted, children and the house. You're the one who stopped us from traveling and gave up most of our activities. You wanted the bigger house and to save up. The kids were too young to travel, couldn't get time off work. There was always some excuse. Is it really about that, or that you had the chance to be with a millionaire? I don't know, Mark. I just felt different there. We got on so well, and I think we had a connection. Oh, just great. Are you in love with him, or was it just lust? God damn it, I never had sex with him. I noticed her choice of words. Never had sex with him, but did sleep with him, I presume. She eventually nodded, tears forming. How charming, and kissed, touched. Another nod and more tears. I needed to leave before my head exploded. You need to go see your children. They are at your mom's. I hope you make a better job of explaining what you're up to than what I did. I stormed out, ignoring Kirsty's calls from behind. I'd been at the pub for about an hour when Tony found me. He got the beers in and sat beside me. Sorry, mate, there's a full hunt out for you. Kirsty called Laura, and people are out looking. John arrived shortly afterward. If it's any consolation, the girls are furious with her as well. Her actions have put them in a tough spot. We're not happy with our wives and are still asking questions and comparing answers to see if there's anything more to it. I asked if there was any news, but they didn't think so. What do you want to do? I have no idea. Sounds like she's in love with the asshole and has disappeared into some romantic fantasy. Just then, my phone rang. Please come home, we need to talk. Nope, just like you, I don't feel like coming back. I ended the call and switched off the phone. Kirsty, it was past midnight when Tony helped Mark back into the house. I had never seen him so drunk. I tried to help, but Mark gave me a look of pure contempt. Tony managed to get him into bed, and he fell asleep immediately. I was just starting to thank Tony for the help when he interrupted. What are you doing to him, Kirsty? Not coming back was bad enough, but now he thinks you're in love with some guy. He deserves better. This is just cruel. Work out what the fuck you want and stop torturing him with the other guy." With that, Tony stormed out. I looked at Mark and got really upset. Tony was right. He didn't deserve this. I was being selfish. He barely moved as I undressed him and tucked him in, leaving a bowl, a drink of water, and 2 aspirin. I was so confused. Mark was such a good man and a great father, and I was the one hurting him. I still loved him and couldn't explain my actions with Samuel. Maybe it was because Samuel saw and talked to me, not Kirsty the wife or mom. He made me feel special. Either way, I needed to forget all of that and get back to being a good wife and mom. Just then, I received a text, "Are you okay?" It was from Samuel, and I ignored it. The truth was I was far from okay. I was hurting the people I loved. Besides Mark, I had to make it up to Jake and Chloe. They knew something was wrong. Then there were my friends, whom I put in an awkward situation. The looks of disappointment I got from my mom and dad when I went to pick the kids up were devastating. I tried to talk to Mark the next morning, but he wasn't interested and seemed annoyed I had seen him drunk. His only words were, "Don't worry, that won't be happening again." He went to work looking very rough, and I started sorting the kids for school. That was the beginning of trying to get back to my normal life. Over the next few days, I got more texts from Samuel, saying he was worried and asking if I was okay. I resisted the urge to answer them. Days passed, and I couldn't seem to reach Mark. We only talked about practical things and tried to keep a pleasant facade up for the kids, but it felt terrible. I was having another bout of tears when the phone rang. I answered without looking. It was Samuel. When he heard about my distress and the situation I was in, he was on the verge of coming to find me. I recounted the conversation I had on the day I returned, expressing my love for my husband and children and the necessity of going back. I also shared the pain we had caused. He admitted to feeling lonely and missing me, feelings I reciprocated despite being surrounded by people at home. He asked if he could see me to ensure I was okay. Initially, I refused, but he persisted, suggesting he would book a local hotel and pleading for a meeting. Despite his persistent texts and calls, I eventually agreed to meet him for lunch while the kids were at school and Mark was at work. He hadn't changed and was genuinely concerned about me. Having someone to confide in was a relief. We conversed effortlessly, and for the first time in weeks, I felt better. I agreed to meet him again the following week. As Mark felt more distant, Samuel became a source of comfort. He was caring and apologetic for causing me problems. Seeing him felt like a lifeline. He was the only person I could talk to. On our 4th lunch date, I went back to his hotel room, and we made love for the first time. It was overwhelming emotionally and physically exhilarating. It wasn't that Samuel was better than Mark, it was the novelty and excitement. I hadn't been intimate since before the girls' trip, which intensified everything. Samuel was thrilled, describing our time together as an honor. We cuddled afterward and made love again. It felt liberating. Unlike with Mark, I felt free and able to open up. When I returned home late, I found Mark asleep in Chloe's room on top of the covers. They had fallen asleep while reading a bedtime story. I felt awful. I gently woke him up and led him to our bed, where he quickly fell asleep again. I lay beside him, crying myself to sleep. I wanted to care for Mark, but I feared I was falling in love with Samuel. It was all a tangled mess, and I was torn. I tried to consider what would be best for Mark. Perhaps it would be kinder to leave if I truly loved him. Was I trying to shield Mark or just being cowardly? I missed being able to seek his advice. He always knew what to do. I arranged to meet Samuel again, this time for dinner, wanting to make it special. The kids were at my mom's, and Mark was away on an overnight trip with his friends. I dressed up in my little black dress, slingback heels, and stockings. Dinner was delightful. We discussed the prospect of running away and getting a divorce. Money wasn't an issue for him, and he offered to help with custody lawyers. When I mentioned my reluctance to move away because of the kids and school, he suggested finding somewhere nearby so we could be together. The sex was incredible. Samuel eagerly removed my dress and adored my lingerie and stockings. It was a complete escape from my mundane and now depressing life. Returning home at midnight, I was distressed to see Mark's car in the driveway. Inside, he held the stocking package in his hand. "Is it him?" he asked. Unable to deny it, I nodded through tears. "So hardly platonic, you're dressing for sex." "That's nice, something for him that you never offered to me," he remarked bitterly. "Let's see, what did you always say?" "That you should be enough for me, without fancy makeup and lingerie, and that you needed to feel comfortable. So he gets more from you than I ever did." I was at a loss for words, unable to comprehend why I hadn't made such efforts for Mark. Perhaps it was a matter of power dynamics within our marriage, or simply the role of being a wife and mother rather than a lover. "Do you believe our entire marriage is dull, or just our sex life? Are there things you do with him that you wouldn't do for me?" Mark inquired. "It's not like that, Mark. I can't explain it. You're not dull in any way," I struggled to articulate. I couldn't quite put it into words. Mark had always been keen on exploring new sexual territories, but I held back and rejected his suggestions. Does that summarize the difference? We are comfortable, and he is thrilling. You're making an effort now, but not for us. How much effort have you put into flirting and dinners? Mark's words hit home, and I disliked acknowledging the truth behind them. It all seemed so complacent and foolish now. Perhaps if I had put in more effort, I wouldn't have sought solace elsewhere. The disparity between Mark and Samuel wasn't significant. The difference lay in my actions and how I treated them. Feeling overwhelmed, I mumbled an apology and retreated to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. I anticipated Mark kicking the door down and demanding I leave, but he didn't. In a state of panic, I dialed Samuel. After ensuring my safety, he urged me to leave and join him. In my mind, my life had become purgatory, and Samuel seemed like my only escape. The following morning, I discovered Mark in the kitchen, having spent the night in the spare room. "I'm deeply sorry, Mark. I've shattered us, and I can't mend it. I think we should consider separating. I need time to discover myself, to figure out what I truly need," I confessed. Seeing through my facade, Mark responded, "It's him, isn't it? You're going to him. Have you been in contact with him all this time?" Taking a deep breath, I admitted, "Yes, for a while now. I need to sort out my feelings for him, and for you, for both of you." Mark's expression was incredulous. "But you're going to figure that out in his bed, so the decision has already been made." "It's not like that. I love you, but I've made a mess of things, and I'm utterly confused by everything, by all these emotions. I need to see if what I feel for him is real." Mark's response was firm. "You can inform the kids. I have no idea how to explain your actions. I'll tell them it's a short vacation. Don't be foolish, they'll expect you to return." "But I might come back." Mark looked at me with disbelief. "What makes you think that's your decision?" "There's no chance. I want you gone by tomorrow, and you're never coming back." "What about the kids and their schooling?" "Are you serious? You wrecked our lives, and now you're concerned about that?" "I'll handle it as usual." "So, go off on another escapade, go find yourself, you'll likely find it at the end of his." Mark's voice trailed off. I was devastated. It hadn't occurred to me that Mark would take control of the situation. His final words were, "Tell your family and friends the truth, I won't cover for you." The next day, packing felt agonizing. It felt wrong, like a mistake, but I had severed ties with Mark, and Samuel was eager for my arrival. Taking one last look around the house, I realized Mark was right. It had been my idea, and despite my love for the place, I had destroyed our once happy home. I had informed the kids that it was a trial separation. It didn't come as a shock to them, as they had sensed something was amiss. Breaking the news to my parents was much more challenging. My mom couldn't stop crying and begged me not to go through with it, while my dad could barely look at me, shaking his head in disappointment. I went to Samuel's hotel, usually finding solace in his company, but this time I couldn't shake off the unease. We stayed for a couple of days before he suggested we get away. We retreated to his yacht in Corfu for a couple of weeks. While the intimacy was enjoyable, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt and homesickness. Sleep evaded me as I found myself pondering what Mark might be doing and how he was coping. We began planning my divorce, with Samuel arranging lawyers who reached out to Mark. We secured a luxurious apartment close to the kids' schools to reside in until the divorce and housing arrangements were finalized. Attempting to reach out to my friends proved futile. Jane and Shona were still navigating rough patches with their husbands and showed no interest in meeting Samuel or socializing. Shona put it plainly, stating they would be supporting Mark and the kids through the ordeal, suggesting it might be best for me to keep my distance from the group for a while. I was incensed. These were my lifelong friends, not Mark's. Laura, my closest friend, was equally unsupportive, unable to fathom why I had left a man like Mark. I was seething with anger. When the kids mentioned the upcoming neighborhood barbecue, I insisted to Samuel that we attend. I had just as much right as Mark to be there. Upon arrival, everyone was already present, including Mark and the kids. Jane wasted no time in asking us to leave, pointing out the insensitivity of my presence with my new boyfriend while leaving my family behind. Samuel tried to pull me away, but it was Jake who brought me back to reality, urging me to leave as I was upsetting Chloe. Horrified, I watched as Chloe ran to Mark, seeking solace in his embrace. Feeling the weight of everyone's stares, I allowed Samuel to guide me out. I was devastated. It felt like I was losing everyone, not just Mark. Kirsty wasted no time initiating the divorce proceedings. I feared losing custody of the kids and my friends. The thought of becoming a weekend dad, slowly drifting apart from my children, haunted me. I dreaded hearing about their adventures on Samuel's yacht. Thankfully, Tony and John stood by me, and to my surprise, Laura, Shona, and Jane provided tremendous support, assisting with childcare, bringing meals, and checking up on me. As the divorce progressed, the financial aspect seemed straightforward with a 50-50 split, but the custody of the kids became a contentious issue. Kirsty sought primary custody and occupancy of the house with the kids, offering to buy me out, backed by her wealthy new partner. Their lawyers displayed arrogance, expecting me to accept whatever was offered and express gratitude. The situation took a turn when my lawyer pointed out that Kirsty had effectively abandoned the kids during her extended holiday and again when she left them to go on a weeks-long yacht trip with Samuel. They tried to argue that she knew the children were being looked after. My lawyer chimed in, yes, looked after by their primary caregiver, the consistent presence in their lives. Additionally, Jake insists on living with his father, and Chloe is adamant about staying with Jake. I hadn't influenced the kids' decisions. I was proud of how Jake took care of Chloe throughout this ordeal. I tried to shield them from the worst of it, but I couldn't fully protect them. Spending time with Tony and John's kids was beneficial for them. Tony's house had a granny annex where we often stayed over. The kids always enjoyed themselves, and the routine and comfort of close friends helped tremendously. It seemed his lawyers were concerned, as their next proposal was joint custody. While I contemplated pushing for sole custody through the courts, it seemed risky, and a compromise would be better for the kids. Eventually, we agreed to split custody, with each of us having the kids half of the week. I had them from Wednesday night to Friday and kept them on my weekends. I also insisted that either of us could attend their school and sports activities, as Kirsty wasn't inclined to do so, providing more access for both of us, and I enjoyed being involved. The house became a point of contention. I declined their offer to buy me out and insisted on selling it. I sensed Samuel was content with this decision, but I knew it would upset Kirsty, which was a pity, genuinely. As for living arrangements, I wasn't worried, as Tony had offered us the annex for minimal rent for as long as we needed. It was much cheaper than our previous mortgage, allowing me to allocate the funds elsewhere until we found a permanent solution. On the day of signing the divorce papers, Kirsty visited me. She reminisced about our past and how good we were together. I pointed out that dwelling on the past wasn't helpful. Then, out of nowhere, she suggested, maybe we shouldn't go through with this. Losing my patience, I responded, you're the one who left our marriage, rushed into a divorce, and now you're having second thoughts. Are you out of your mind? Maybe I am. I left because I thought you'd never forgive me. I made a mistake and only dug myself deeper. What's the matter, not living the dream with your new man? He's not you. I miss us and our life together. The idea of a happy life with Kirsty crossed my mind, including all our plans and aspirations. But it wasn't real. She wasn't who I thought she was. Shallow was the word that came to mind. Just sign the papers and go, Kirsty. I found myself back at the pub, celebrating my divorce with the guys when John asked, "We're happy to drink with you, but maybe we can do something more meaningful. What do you want from life? The bigger picture? The meaning of life and all that?" Surprisingly deep for John. I didn't have a clear answer, but it occurred to me that I might have options, dreams, things I loved doing. The kids were my priority, but perhaps I could do more than just get by. On the days when I didn't have the kids, I found myself with more free time. I rekindled my love for cycling, jogging, and hiking, which helped me feel better about myself. Being left for another man was a blow to my ego, but engaging in activities I enjoyed naturally led to improved fitness and boosted my self-confidence. Even the kids started joining in on some of these activities. Shona tried setting me up on dates, but I wasn't ready and felt apprehensive about starting anew with someone else. I appreciated the efforts, but I was still hesitant. Shona, Jane, and Laura continued to invite us over for dinners with their families, and Laura even brought us meals every Thursday. Their kindness touched me, and I felt grateful for their support during this tough time. I asked Jane why they were being so kind to me, considering they were Kirsty's friends more than mine. She laughed and explained that they appreciated how much I had always been there for them and their kids without hesitation. It was heartwarming, and I couldn't help but feel touched by their gestures. I started planning weekend trips with the kids, filled with sports and outdoor activities, which they thoroughly enjoyed. These trips often involved other families and Laura, adding to the fun. When Kirsty had the kids, I took the opportunity to go on longer hikes and rides, reconnecting with my passion for the mountains. I even reconnected with old climbing buddies, reigniting friendships I had let lapse over the years. Living in the annex meant less maintenance and some extra cash, allowing me to save up for special trips with the kids. Our summer adventure to the Andes, including a visit to Machu Picchu, was a huge hit, and we started planning our next trip, possibly to the Alps. Things took a strange turn when Laura began acting flirtatiously, and Kirsty started engaging in more conversation during the kids' handovers. Meanwhile, hearing the excitement in the kids' voices during their holiday and seeing Mark's social media posts filled with their adventures, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. It seemed Mark's life was far from boring now, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had been the one holding him back from such experiences before. Seeing Mark's climbing photos and pictures of outings with our old friends, as well as the camping trips with Jane, Shona, and Laura's families, stirred up mixed emotions in me. I realized it was jealousy, despite the fact that I was the one who had chosen to step away from that life. When I suggested a holiday on the yacht, the kids weren't interested, indicating they preferred spending time with their dad because he was more active. Even suggesting a trip to Disney with just me and them garnered more enthusiasm, although I sensed Samuel wasn't thrilled about it. Living with someone on a daily basis is vastly different from occasional meetings. Once the initial excitement faded, I realized that Samuel was remarkably similar to my ex-husband. He was pleasant but not superior to Mark, both were fundamentally good men. Samuel struggled to adjust to life with children and the demands it placed on his time. We couldn't simply take off on spontaneous trips and leave them behind. Moreover, they weren't interested in the city getaways, fine dining, and luxury hotels that Samuel was accustomed to. He made efforts, but eventually grew resentful of having to accommodate my previous lifestyle. I found myself missing my friends and our family time together, and most of all, I missed Mark. Thoughts of him frequently crossed my mind, reminiscing about the comfort of our companionship. I longed for his presence, the reassuring presence of my best friend who always offered sage advice and knew how to make things better. Deep down, I realized that it was Mark whom I truly loved, the one who had stood by me during tough times. This was a difficult realization to accept, especially knowing that Mark wasn't there to support me. I had pushed him away, and tears quickly followed that acknowledgement. When I dropped the kids off, Laura was there. It was a relief to see her. Among everyone, she had been my closest friend, although we hadn't spoken in a while. As the kids hurried inside, Laura mentioned bringing over a meal, and I expressed gratitude for her help with the kids, acknowledging her as a good friend. I teased about Mark's lackluster cooking skills. We exchanged pleasantries and asked about each other's well-being. Then Laura hesitated before speaking again. I can't understand why you did this. I was so protective of you until Mark came along, but you two were perfect together. And then with the kids, you seemed complete. I envied the life you had, and now you've thrown it all away. I struggled to respond, admitting, I don't know. I got caught up in something and couldn't extricate myself before it was too late. Well, if it's any consolation, your loss might be my gain, Laura remarked. What do you mean? I asked, taken aback. I always joked that if I had met him before you did, I would have snatched him up. But I meant it. We've always gotten along well and had fun together. He's hurting, but I'll help him heal. You mean, you and Mark? I stuttered, shocked. Yes, absolutely, if he'll have me. He's far better than any of my previous partners. You were crazy to let him go. But, you can't. I protested weakly. I can, and I will. We're friends, and we can handle the kids between us. It'll be much easier than dealing with some wicked stepmother criticizing you at every turn. Tears of frustration and jealousy welled up in my eyes as I watched Laura walk away, a hint of a skip in her step. I wiped my tears and entered the annex. The kids had retreated to their rooms, likely engrossed in their phones or laptops. I smiled as I saw Mark attempting to heat up Laura's meal in the kitchen, looking trim, handsome, and utterly bewildered by the microwave. I asked if we could have a conversation, and he seemed a bit puzzled but gestured towards the table. Mark, what advice would you give to a friend who feels they've made the biggest mistake of their life and doesn't know how to fix it? It's hard to say without knowing what the mistake is, he replied. Isn't it obvious? I pressed. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I'm sorry for everything. I want to come back, I confessed. He looked genuinely shocked. To be honest, Kirsty, you did me a favor. I lost myself in trying to fulfill your expectations and maintain our marriage. Now, I love my life, traveling, spending time with the kids and friends. I used to work solely to provide for our family, but now I'm pursuing my passions. It's only the beginning, anything is possible. Remember when you said you needed to find yourself? Well, I guess that's what I've done. I found me, maybe. But what if you could have all of that and share it with someone special? I pleaded. And does Samuel know about your sudden change of heart? He questioned. I shook my head. So you're still unsure? I thought I was too dull for you. Did the excitement with him wear off already? I never meant that, and you've proven me wrong now. If anything, I regret holding you back and not giving you everything. Your zest for life shines through. I'd beg if I thought it would make a difference, I confessed. Mark took a deep breath. No, it wouldn't help. Not for the kid's sake, and not for me. I realized I didn't really know you and could never trust you again. We can be civil for the kids, but that's as far as it goes. I tried to leave before my tears overwhelmed me. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't hold back the flood of emotions when I returned to the apartment. Samuel noticed my distress and asked what had happened. Through tears, all I could manage was, Mark. If I had hoped for some comfort, I was mistaken. Samuel looked straight through me. You still love him, don't you? I couldn't find the words to respond, the tears were too much. Samuel silently picked up his coat and left. He returned a few days later, but only to collect his things. He never returned, and I didn't try to contact him. Before I could attempt to reconcile with Mark, it was evident that he and Laura had become a couple. She was there every time I dropped off the kids, and I had never seen her happier. Mark looked at her with the same affection he once had for me. They were a close-knit family, and I couldn't even feel resentment towards Laura. She was genuinely kind, and they made a wonderful couple. I tried to be happy for them, but I couldn't shake off the despair. It felt like Laura was living the life I had dreamed of. When the lease on the apartment expired, I moved back in with my mom, talk about living life in reverse. Meanwhile, my ex-husband was living the life I had longed for, with my best friend by his side, and I had a front-row seat to witness it all. I found myself alone in the world, feeling utterly lost. Reflecting on the series of events, the decision to go on that girl's holiday, the choice to go out, being persuaded into attending the party, that extra drink, and talking to Samuel, I realized that any of 100 minor decisions could have altered the outcome. I could blame a million things, but ultimately, each decision was my own, and I bore the responsibility for it all. Mark, so there it was, betrayed by my wife, bracing for the worst, yet somehow, things turned out better than expected. Why didn't it become the disaster often depicted in stories? Well, it was due to the unwavering support of good friends and family who stood by me. I was astounded by how resilient the kids were. Perhaps we've succeeded in instilling strong values in them to navigate life's challenges. Finding Laura was a stroke of luck, although she insists it's the other way around, describing our relationship as her fairy tale ending. I also discovered a newfound inner strength within myself, rekindling a sense of identity that wasn't reliant on another person's perspective or actions. And despite the initial resentment towards Kirsty, even that feeling eventually dissipated. Laura firmly believes that I achieved the ultimate revenge by living a fulfilling life. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.